Hello. The last times we discussed what happens in this system, the object of governance, multi-sectoral production-consumption system of the state. And only the system as a whole has value for society, since outside of it, any enterprise is not life-consistent, since it cannot provide its personnel with self-sufficiency, in the sense of production and consumption of everything that is necessary for life. We considered this object of governance, analyze what means of governance are, how the task of stability in terms of predictability of its behavior is solved, how planning can be carried out in such a way that the market mechanism is subordinate to the plan. But nonetheless, we must understand that even if we are considering such a system, and we have set everything up well, and it seems like it should work without problems at the macro level, then in every sector there are many enterprises. And if these enterprises in their main statistical mass are defective, then there will be no sense from the macroeconomic system. Therefore, we must consider both levels, both the macro level and the micro level, the level of enterprises in every sector. Because in order to build an effective economic system of the state, we must ensure high-quality governance, both at the macro level and at the micro level. If we talk about the micro level, then, regardless of what the economy is called, planned market economy, market subordinate to the plan, or otherwise, in any case, if there is a financial credit system at the micro level, at the level of one enterprise, the task of ensuring the profitability of the operation of the enterprise in the foreseeable future is solved. That is, in the foreseeable future, governance should be such that costs are less than the income from activities that the company is engaged in. Therefore, the vast majority of literature on the theme of enterprise governance proceeds from the analysis of financial activities that accompany the organization of the enterprise and the technologies that are used in it. And if we talk about the literature on this theme, then most of all I like the book Economy of the Enterprise, edited by V.Y. Hripach, publishing house Minsk Econom Press. There were at least 3 reprints, 1999, 2000 and 2001. It covers almost the full range of tasks that need to be solved in order to govern an enterprise. In general, in it everything is fine, except that it does not consider the macro level as an object of governance, and if we talk about how the macro level is represented in it, then this is the usual liberal market approach with some elements of state regulation market, but not the systemic approach which we profess. When the macroeconomic system, a set of sectors in the regions and in the state as a whole, is considered as an object of governance. But this is a drawback, not only of the book, edited by Hripach, it is a drawback of the overwhelming majority of publications on the theme of enterprise economy that takes place in historically formed economic science. If we talk about this approach, then in principle there is nothing complicated. You just need to understand what a T-shaped account is, how accounting is conducted, how the costs of an enterprise and its departments are analyzed, how incomes arise, how to redistribute them within the departments of the enterprise in order for the enterprise to function successfully. Yes, you need to know all this, but nonetheless, you still need to remember the saying, "It is not gold that the rich eat." We must remember Pushkin, which is to say that he could tell the ways in which a state progresses, the actual things that make it thrive, and why for gold it need not strive when basic products it possesses. In other words, all financial circulation, both outside the jurisdiction of the enterprise and within the authority of the administration of the enterprise, only accompanies the product exchange. And accordingly, if we are interested in a product, then we must obtain a quality product. A quality product, it is like this. Here is a picture taken from the internet. Apparently, this is a photograph of one of the Petersburg yards. Pay attention, the 19th century, shaped casting. The 20th century, part of the shaped casting was lost, but nonetheless they somehow twisted something there. They welded it, riveted it. The 21st century, primitivism, total primitivism. In other words, there is an obvious degradation of quality. And this is the past era, the temple complex of Kiji. Everything was built without a single nail, and if you evaluate it, then this is, if not the standard of perfection and quality, then it's very close to this standard of perfection and quality. And accordingly, if we focus on the fact that the economy should produce good quality products, then we should consider the governance towards any enterprise in the aspect of governance towards the quality of the product. And the situation concerning the quality of products, to put it mildly, is not very good. And if we talk about how society understands this problematics, then this demotivator shows that there is a lot of fanaticism, but in fact, there is no understanding of the essence of the matter. The inscription, Tshushima 1905, we can repeat it. Those who wrote this, they either sneered at the ordinary man, or demonstrated their blatant ignorance, because Tshushima is a complete defeat of the Russian fleet, and the only general battle that the Russian fleet has lost. All other general battles in past eras were won by the Russian fleet. But the promise that we can repeat Tshushima leads to sad thoughts about the future, because the cultural level, the level of education of the population in the post-Soviet era has degraded, and this can really happen again. The answer to this inscription is also given. Better to copy Toyota. Yes, of course it would be good to copy Toyota, but it would be better to do something better than Toyota. But this requires a certain culture, and there has to be a certain culture, subculture, governance towards the quality of the product. Therefore today, and in subsequent lectures, we will be dealing with a boring theme, governance towards quality of product. Most people want to consume high-quality products, but few people ponder on how to produce them. This even applies to those who govern enterprises, departments of enterprises, and in general, everywhere we have services of governance towards quality. Every self-respecting enterprise has a document called quality policy, but the quality of products leaves much to be desired. At the same time, the standards of the ISO 9000 series, if we are sincere with ourselves, then we must honestly admit that they do not work in Russia. Why don't they work? The answer to this question is twofold. Firstly, there are macroeconomic factors that condition the functional operability of the ISO 9000 series of standards in the economies of scientifically developed countries. These factors are absent in the Russian economy. Moreover, the ISO 9000 series of quality standards are a generation of a certain mentality. And since this mentality is defective in some aspects, the standards of the ISO 9000 series also express a certain defect of this mentality. And besides, one must understand that when in many higher educational institutions, primarily in engineering specialties, training courses called quality management are taught, then these courses are also defective. Let's just go back to the classics. William Deming is one of the most recognized authoritative people in the field of product quality management. He outlined 14 principles that must ensure product quality. These 14 principles are present in almost every Russian textbook on the discipline quality management in the following wording. The first, make it so that you have a constant objective. Let us begin with the fact that this principle is initially erroneous, because in the process of development of an enterprise, society, product, it is required to regularly create new objectives. And the possibilities for achieving these new objectives are opened up by the fact of achieving the previously set objectives. Therefore, the first principle, make it so that you have a constant objective, it is limitedly functionally operable. The second, adopt a new philosophy. Nothing about the content of the new philosophy. But nevertheless, the approach is really correct, because even if we talk about the standards of the ISO 9000 series, about any system of governance towards quality, regardless of how it relates to these standards, they are always the expression of a certain philosophy of quality of governance towards production. Therefore, the questions of the philosophy of governance towards quality are really relevant, they are fundamental, because mistakes at the level of philosophy of governance towards quality cause holes in systems of governance towards quality. Holes in systems of standards on the basis of which standard models of governance towards quality are built. Therefore, one can agree with the second principle, but it's necessary to explain it more widely. Today's and several subsequent lectures will be devoted to a wider explanation of this principle. The third, eliminate the need for mass inspection. Yes, this is very important, because if you are forced to control every item of the product at the exit from the conveyor, then full technical control is disassembling the product up to the screw and the subsequent assembly as needed with the replacement of defective components and parts, the replacement of some technological media, liquids, replacing non-separable units, disposable equipment, and indeed, the more difficult the technical control, the higher the production cost, the higher the sales problems. But most importantly, this does not solve problems of quality. The fourth, do not enter into business contracts only on the basis of value. We can fully and completely agree with this. But let's turn to Federal Law number 44, on the contract system in state and municipal procurement of goods, works and services. Article 24, Methods of determination of suppliers, contractors, performers. Part 3, a tender is a method of determination of supplier, contractor, performer, at which the winner is the procurement participant who is offered the best conditions of contract execution. An ambiguity immediately appears in the law. What are the best conditions of contract execution? Because if we understand this in a broad sense, then the question arises about the methodology for evaluating offers, which should ensure the comparability of each of the offers of all participants of the tender. If there is no such methodology, then we get pure discretion subjectivism, because from the point of view of the Competition Commission, there are no objective criteria, and the subjective approach in this case also allows the implementation of many corruption schemes. That is, it is programmed at the level of the federal law. Article 24, Part 4. An auction is a method of determination of supplier, contractor, performer, at which the winner is the procurement participant who has offered the smallest contract price. To put it another way, the authors of this provision have never dealt with the problem of governance towards product quality, which explicitly states that contracts should not be concluded solely on the basis of evaluations of cost indicators. Article 24, Part 5. A customer chooses the method of determination of supplier, contractor, performer, according to provisions of this chapter. However, he has no right to make actions that result in unreasonable reduction of number of procurement participants. If we talk about a reasonable reduction in the number of participants in the procurement, then again we are faced with the problem of the methodology for evaluating offers. But in every sector, in relation to every product, every offer should have its own methodology, and the law in no way regulates the question of generating this methodology, where it comes from and how it comes, and what role price indicators should play. It turns out that at the level of Federal Law 44, in principle, at the level of the macroeconomy, such an approach is programmed, in which low-quality, cheap stuff is guaranteed to win tenders, because investments in quality increase the cost price of production, increase the price of offers, and if there is no methodology that evaluates the quality of products, then the only criterion is cheapness. The fifth, constantly engage in improvement. Yes, right. The sixth, engage in the training of personnel directly at the workplace. Yes, that's right. The seventh, implement a style of governance based on leadership. What is leadership is also a debatable question, because in the overwhelming majority of cases, leadership is understood as following the principle, do as I do. And the principle, do as I do, does not always work, and in principle does not work in hierarchically organized systems. Because if at one level of the hierarchy one must do one thing, then at another level of the hierarchy one must do another thing. The eighth, root out fear. Well, it is true. If a person is shackled by fears, then he cannot work effectively. You can't get away from this. The 9th, break down barriers between departments. Yes, people must communicate, because the technological progress is an integral process, and mistakes made at some stages can impact the quality of the product and its competitiveness. Therefore, what in Soviet times was called cross-border brigades that united people by overcoming the dividing barriers between departments in a single common cause, this was right. The 10th, avoid exaggeration and use of slogans. It's correct too. The 11th, avoid setting unreasonable performance standards. Correct too. The 12th, remove the constraints that prevent people from feeling proud of their work. Also correct. The 13th, implement a mass learning and self-improvement program. That's correct too. And the 14th, involve everyone in the work of changing the organization. It is not very good here, because the constant changes in the organizational staff structure, technology and everything else is one of the ways to completely disorganize the work. But involve everyone in the work of perfecting the organization. This is another matter, because the perfection of the organization usually proceeds in stages, includes several stages: analysis and detection of flaws of the existing organization, development of measures to improve this organization, preparation of personnel for work in new organizations, and in fact the transition to this new organization, then its testing, and the cycle closes. In fact, it turns out that if a student swats these 14 principles of product quality management, then coming to work at any enterprise, even in the quality management service, on the basis of these spells, in fact magic spells, he will not be able to organize anything, because all these abstractions need to be filled with concretics. And the mastery of concretics is years of work at the enterprise, studying everything that happens there, and not just what relates to his official duties and responsibilities, because everything intersects, everything affects each other. This is the reality of any production of any complex science-intensive products. The second side of the question is that governance towards quality is not the Pythagorean theorem. That is, figuratively speaking, different people can engage in the proof of the Pythagorean theorem, prove it in different ways, in different methods, but the result will always be the same. The sum of the squares of the legs is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. But with governance towards quality, the situation is different. Even if at one enterprise there is some breakthrough in the sphere of governance towards quality, as a result of which the quality of its products rises to a height unattainable for competitors, then the people involved in this achievement will describe it in different ways. Therefore, if Deming outlined 14 principles, then someone else, analyzing the problematics, would set out a different number of principles, and the formulations of the principles could be different. Therefore, this requires a different approach. You also need to understand that small causes have major consequences, including in the aspect of product quality loss. Here is a photo. This is the AN-22, a miracle of half a century ago in the Soviet aircraft industry. Entail, cargo capacity of 65 tons, a record in its time. 4 turboprop engines with counter-rotating propellers, NK-12. Such engines are now installed on the Tu-95, and in the past, even on the Tu-114. In 1969, there were 2 plane crashes. One NTA went missing over the Atlantic Ocean when it was flying from Europe to Peru with a cargo of humanitarian aid after the earthquake had struck Peru. The other NTA fell in India a few months later near Calcutta. In both cases, everyone on board died. Since the other one fell on land, it was possible to examine the wreckage. 3 blades of the front propeller of one of the engines protruded from the hub, and the 4th blade, as it seemed at first, was in the ground. All 4 blades of the rear rotor were cut off at the base into a lump and scattered across the field. So when the hub was lifted, it turned out that the 4th blade was not in the ground, but it had broken off, and at the root there remained a small butt part of this blade, closest to the hub. and the rest was ripped off. Later, all 4 blades of the rear propeller were found, as well as this very lost blade of the front propeller. So it turned out that the destruction of the propeller blade became the cause of the plane's crash. Cracks appeared at the base of the blade. The cracks spread. And the reason for the cracks was a knife cut, about 0.3 millimeters deep. The causes of the occurrence. The butt part of the blade was plastic. It was cast. And according to the technology, cutting off the flash had to be carried out with a plastic knife. The worker who had carried out this operation was physically weak. And it turned out that instead of cutting off the flash with a plastic knife, he had cut off this flash with a steel knife, a boot knife, which had left these micro cuts on the surface. As a result, such a small change in the technology, which no one had noticed in the process, led to the death of 2 aircraft and the replacement of propellers on 13 other aircraft. Here is another example which shows that small causes have major consequences. This is the ruins of the chemical plant in the city of Opal in Germany. The catastrophe happened in the early 20s. The essence is simple. In the plant there had accumulated deposits of ammonium nitrate as production waste, about 8,000 tons. But in the 20s, ammonium nitrate became a raw material for the production of chemical fertilizers. And it was this mountain of ammonium nitrate that they decided to recycle. But since it had accumulated over the years in an open area, it was a monolith that had to be crushed. It was proposed to crush this monolith with small explosions, and it was proposed to use black powder as an explosive. And so they did. All was good. But the contractor decided to speed up the process, and abandoning black powder, decided to use a more powerful explosive. As a result, the wrong explosive was used, and 8,000 tons of ammonium nitrate detonated with a coefficient of about 0.4 TNT equivalent. As a result, the plant was almost completely destroyed. At the nearest station, a train was blown off the rails. Glass was smashed within a radius of 70 kilometers. Well, since the explosion happened during the shift change, when one shift was leaving the plant and the other was taking on continuous production, there were quite a lot of deaths. In other words, these are examples that in governance towards product quality, and we will consider the governance towards micro-level enterprises precisely through the prism of product quality. There are no trifles, and everything needs to be delved into. So, as for the quality of our products, this is the way it is. This is taken from the internet. One of the videos on YouTube dedicated to how men bought a UAZ Loaf car. The photo shows the opening of the rear tailgate. There is a dangling stuck electrode. The stuck electrode is an indicator of the welder's qualifications or his attitude towards labor. In other words, the qualification of the welder is at a level close to 0, or his attitude towards labor is get away from me, I work the way I want, do not bother me, if you don't like it, do it yourself. What is interesting in this case is that the stuck electrode was not torn off by the welder himself, or at the subsequent stages of the technological process, and the car successfully reached the dealership, where it was captured on video when buying this car. Then there was a video on the theme that it was supposedly some kind of unmerchantable UAZ, that in actual fact manual welding is not used at the plant, but the video showed the assembly process of the Patriot car, and not the assembly process of the UAZ Loaf. And besides, the question arises, if the UAZ is unmerchantable, then where did it get the legal vehicle identification number? So there are many questions, namely questions about how product quality is generated, because all training courses on governance towards quality describe in more or less detail the history of quality management and partly describe the functioning of systems of quality management based on the ISO 9000 series standards. As I said earlier, in order for the ISO 9000 system of standards to work, some macroeconomic factors are required that are not in the Russian economy. Therefore, it cannot work. But there is not a single word about this in the textbooks on governance towards quality. And besides, there are holes in the standards themselves, due to the defectiveness of the philosophy of governance towards quality that gave rise to this very ISO 9000 system. This picture can be found in almost any textbook on the discipline of governance towards quality. This is the Deming Cycle. The Deming Cycle did not start from scratch. Governance towards quality is a field of activity, in which the activity itself dictates the rules for conducting this activity. If you ignore the activity and do not delve into it, then you won't be able to ensure quality. Well, if you analyze the activity, delve into it, then you will come to something close to what is shown in the Deming Cycle. The Deming Cycle is a piece of the entire function of governance. It is not the entire function of governance, it's only a piece of it. But nonetheless, it's good that at least there is a piece. Because if to approach this question from the position of the sufficiently general theory of governance, and to consider not the Deming Cycle but the entire function of governance towards the life cycle of a product, then the Deming Cycle would fit into it as one of the elements, one of the stages of the entire function of governance, or several stages. This depends on the detailedness. There are 4 sectors. It all starts with A. Let's say, actions to improve, change the established practice, if the project is successful, or move to the next cycle. Further, plan of improvements, do the planned, check the results, working out of new proposals for improvement, and then the cycle repeats. This is the Deming Cycle in minimal detailedness. And here is the Deming Cycle in more complete detailedness. Here it's already considered as the life cycle of a product. It starts with marketing and market research, product development, process preparation. Well, most likely there is also preparation of equipment, purchase, procurement, delivery of everything that is necessary for production. Production, testing, quality checking, package and storage, sales, installation and startup at the customer's site, technical support and service, control of use, and further removal, disposal of waste, renewal of the same cycle. Most likely it's in relation to the next generation of products, or improvement and modernization of products within the production of the same generation. This is also found in almost every textbook on governance towards quality. Well, this is more complete, and it's closer to the entire function of governance towards product life cycles. There is one more picture. Here you can see the interconnection between the Deming Cycle and standardization. Here the Deming Cycle is shown as a certain process that rolls up a hill on an inclined plane. The inscription continuous improvement and the same cycle. Act, plan, do and check. Well, so that quality does not roll back down, each group, a certain plurality of product improvements, is fixed at the standard level. The circumstance is very important. Standardization and the system of governance towards quality are really closely related. And if there is no standardization that consolidates the results achieved, then the quality in the future is not guaranteed, because there are no standards for comparing what is being done with what should be being done. Well, what is interesting here is that such a picture is present mainly with English language texts. In Russian versions, it's absent, or it's so rarely used that search engines do not find it. And this circumstance is one of the disasters of our economy, because the role of the system of standards, the system of standardization and certification of products as a means of macroeconomic governance, and as an instrument for governing scientific technological progress, in the overwhelming majority of cases, the engineering, technical, and administrative staff of enterprises in Russia do not consciously perceive. And this theme, standardization as an instrument of governance towards product quality, and standardization as an instrument for governing scientific technological progress, is absent in the curricula, most likely, of most of the Russian institutions of higher education. Maybe some professors touch upon this theme at their own initiative, but such people, I think, are few in number. There is another aspect that shows that product quality is not on its own. If we produce any product, then its production, marketing, consumption, disposal and recycling, or the absence of disposal and recycling, is a contribution to the quality of life of society. And here we are faced with what is written in this illustration for a plastic spoon. Yes, these spoons can be produced and be of poor quality in the sense that when using them, for example, if you dip it into hot soup, it starts to emit some kind of chemicals that are harmful for your health. Then this is obviously a low-quality spoon. However, it can be produced. But a spoon can be of high quality. That is, if you dip it into hot soup, it emits no chemicals, and using it is safe for your health. Then the question arises, what will happen next? Next, there will be this. The culture of society is such that quite a big number of both high-quality disposable items, high quality in the sense that usage of them does not harm your health, and low-quality items that harm your health directly, in the culture of the current global civilization, generate this quality of life. Look at the map of the world's oceans. There are 2 garbage continents in the Pacific Ocean, and there are also garbage continents in the Atlantic Ocean, and there are garbage islands in the Indian Ocean. But in reality it looks like this. On the upper right photograph taken from a ship, water is not seen, only garbage. The bottom left photo is the same, but the view from under the water. The bottom right photo is a beach on an island in the Pacific Ocean. I also came across a demotivator on the internet, 2 whale carcasses on the shore, and the reports say that spare parts for cars and plastic garbage were found in their stomachs. And here is a reaction of some clever, witty internet user. Are there spare parts for the specific car that the user owns? To put it differently, the global ecological catastrophe is perceived by many banderlogs simply as a reason for a joke, although it's able to kill the biosphere of the planet and kill it in such a way that there will be no room in the biosphere of the planet for an ecological niche for the biological species Homo sapiens. Nevertheless, the theme of the impact of product quality on the quality of life of society, on the quality of life of global civilization, in quality governance courses is absent, although it should be clear that it is bad to do something that should not be done at all. Further, it's necessary to analyze how product quality is understood in the historically formed culture and in the subculture of governance towards quality. William Deming, according to the 1988 publication, quality must be defined in terms of customer satisfaction. That is, this is already a definition that stems from the culture of society of consumption. Quality is multidimensional. It is impossible to determine the quality of products using some individual characteristics or just one point of view. Yes, quality is truly multidimensional. But then the question arises about the selection of different points of view that distinguish high-quality products from low-quality ones. And the fact that the selection of different degrees is a relevant issue. It was shown in all these pictures here, because from one point of view, the production of this is unacceptable, because it introduces big problems into the life of global civilization. But from the point of view of others, it is simply fine, because you don't need to wash the dishes, and you can return from a picnic without being burdened with all the work of human activity that was necessary for this picnic. Therefore, the question of how to understand the term quality of product in the matter of governance towards quality is far from being the last question in significance, because depending on how you define the term quality of product, you will build a corresponding theory of governance towards quality. And the implementation of this philosophy of governance towards quality in the practice of economic activity, in the everyday life of society, will generate certain qualities of life in society. And mistakes at the level of the philosophy of governance towards quality in the definition of the very term quality of product can be very, very serious. Ishikawa, 1915-1989, according to the 1985 publication. Quality should not be interpreted in the narrow sense, but interpreted broadly, including price, delivery, and safety, to satisfy consumers' needs, and so on. The price of a product or service is an important part of its quality. There is already some contradiction with Deming, who pointed out that the price of products should be considered separately, but not as an indicator of quality. But in general, Ishikawa is right. Quality should not be interpreted in the narrow sense, but interpreted broadly, including price, delivery, and safety, to satisfy consumers' needs. Because it's precisely these factors that determine the quality of the product itself. Shewart. Years of life 1891 to 1967, according to the 1931 publication. There are two aspects of quality. One, objective quality, which deals with the quality of a thing as an objective reality of the thing, independent of the existence of man. And two, subjective quality, which deals with the quality of a thing relative to what man thinks, feels or senses as a result of the objective reality. From the viewpoint of governance towards quality in manufacturing, it is necessary to establish standards of quality in a quantitative manner. For this reason, we are forced at the present time to express such standards, insofar as possible, in terms of quantitatively measurable physical properties. This does not mean, however, that the subjective measure of quality is not of interest. On the contrary, it is the subjective measure that is of commercial interest. So it is true. In order to govern the quality of products, measurable indicators of this quality are needed, but subjective measure still remains. A well-known anecdote. If a young lady has measurements of 90, 60, 90, this does not mean that she is a beauty. This is about the fact that subjective characteristics, subjective measure of quality, and objective indicators according to which governance towards quality of the product is carried out are interconnected. And this interconnection should be such that on the basis of objective metrologically consistent characteristics, it hits the bullseye. Shewart further continues, looked at broadly, there are at a given time certain human wants to be fulfilled through the fabrication of raw materials into finished products of different kinds. These wants are statistical in nature, in that the quality of a finished product in terms of the physical characteristics wanted by one individual is not the same for all individuals. Yes, this is correct. However, none of these definitions of quality are generally accepted, moreover juridically binding. The reason for this was explained by Robert Pirsig, born in 1928, from the 1974 publication, similar to the following. Quality is impossible to determine. If you can't pinpoint an object, there is no way to know if it exists at all. Quality is similar to contemporary art. We most likely can't determine what it is, but we almost always find out what it is when we see it. We are dealing with intellectual dishonesty when terms are used in discussions that cannot be precisely defined. In fact, Pirsig pointed to the main problematics of all governorial tasks, including governance towards quality, metrological consistency, metrological support of activities. Well, if the questions of metrology cannot be resolved, then there remains only a certain subculture, expressing shamanism in the field of governance towards quality, which boils down to the well-known phrase from the Soviet film, The Sorcerers. The main thing is that the costume suits. But the fact that the costume suits, this is not formalizable. But at the same time, it must be ensured that the fabric is good, and the cut is good, corresponding to the figure, and the quality of the seams, buttons, sewing of buttons, everything must be ensured. But from all these small particularities, there emerges this general quality. The main thing is that the costume suits. However, there is also a juridically binding definition of quality. It is given in the current different organizations of the ISO 9000 series of standards. It turns out that in different standards of this series, the concept of quality is also defined differently. So the Russian state standards, are ISO 9000-2015, does not give a clear definition of the term quality in the format quality is. It is limited by ambiguously understood, verbose reasoning on the usefulness of ensuring the quality of products and services in the activities of an enterprise and an organization. This is how the state standard defines the term. A quality-oriented organization encourages a culture that is reflected in behaviors, attitudes, actions and processes that create value by meeting the needs and expectations of customers and other relevant interested parties. The quality of an organization's products and services is determined by the ability to satisfy customers and by intentionally or unintentionally influencing relevant interested parties. The quality of products and services includes not only the performance of functions in accordance with the purpose and their characteristics, but also the perceived value and benefits for the consumer. That is, if the authors of the state standard are ISO 9000-2015, instead of defining the term quality, shy away from it and give out empty verbal fornication, then governance towards quality on the basis of this standard is impossible. And again we return to the film The Sorcerers. This is a definition in the style. The main thing is that the costume suits. But the result is ensured exclusively by the art of the tailor, which is not formalizable, and which is impossible to describe metrologically consistently. There is one more state standard, ISO 9001-2015. Quality Management System. Requirements. In Clause 3, Terms and Definitions, the state standard simply refers to the state standard RISO 9000-2015, which I quoted earlier, as a result of which it also becomes metrologically inconsistent. Along with this, there is a Russian language version of the international standard ISO 9000-2011 Quality Management System, Fundamentals and Vocabulary, which seems to operate as they are to this day. Along with state standard RISO 9001-2015, it defines quality as follows. Clause 3.11. Quality, the degree to which the aggregate and inherent characteristics 3.5.1 meet the requirements 3.1.2. Requirement, a need or an expectation which is established is usually assumed or is obligatory. Clause 3.5.1. Characteristic distinctive property. Well, everything seems to be fine here. If there are certain requirements, then the quality is ensured. However, the formation of a set of requirements for products is not even the first stage of the entire function of governance. Therefore, if you mess up at the stage of forming a set of requirements for products, then you will fit into this definition of the term quality in the standard. But the products will be of poor quality. In particular, at the time of the construction, the Titanic fully met the requirements set forth by the customer and the regulatory framework in force at that time. Nevertheless, Titanic became a metaphor, a symbol of catastrophe. Fukushima, a nuclear power plant in Japan, destroyed by an earthquake. Presumably, it also met all the requirements that the customer presented to the design of this plant. Therefore, the question of defining the term quality of product is not the easiest question, but it conditions a lot in the entire subsequent subculture of governance towards the quality of the product. Soviet State Standard 15460 of 1979. Quality of product is the combination of product properties that determine its suitability to satisfy certain needs in accordance with its purpose. If this definition is compared with the definitions of the standards of the ISO 9000 series, then the Soviet definition is better. It is governorially more consistent than ISO 9000. And therefore the question arises, what did they think with, and what were they guided by, when they introduced the standards of ISO 9000 series in Russia in order to be at the world level, without realizing that in many aspects, this world level was lower than the level determined in the state standards of the Soviet period. This definition is better because it directly correlates quality of product with needs and with the circumstances in which the needs are satisfied, i.e., it correlates with the stages of the entire function of governance at which the detection of problems and the setting of objectives is carried out, and which precede the stage of developing a set of requirements for products. But nonetheless, there is one more definition referring to State Soviet Standard number 15467779, which is also a close definition, and taken from the textbook Quality Management, Fundamentals of Theory and Practice by Gvozdin. Quality of product is a set of properties and characteristics that are objectively inherent in products, the level or variant of which is formed when creating products in order to satisfy existing needs. These two definitions are better than the ISO definition, due to the fact that the orientation towards needs as such gives rise to a defective definition of quality of the product. We must return to what has already been said many times. There are objective laws to which the life of people, families, social groups, culturally peculiar societies, humanity as a whole, is subordinate. These objective laws can be attributed to 6 groups. Species-specific and socio-cultural objective laws are those groups of objective laws that generate the needs of society in products, and above all, determine the content that we introduce into the term quality of product. Moreover, they determine it in a concrete way in relation to each type of product, and accordingly, if the subculture of governance towards quality of product is built on the basis of them, in relation to them, then it turns out that at the enterprise level, at the level of marketing service of the enterprise, you need to know them and build an enterprise policy in the field of creating or conquering certain markets correlating with these objective laws, so as not to produce something that destroys or undermines the quality of life of society. Because the quality of life of society is when the biosphere is stable, the biocenosis are stable, when man's ecological niche is not overfull, not overpopulated. That is, the population density everywhere is within acceptable limits, ensuring the reproduction of a healthy population in the continuity of generations, where everyone is fed, dressed, has housing that allows the family to live, where the system of education forms a human type of psyche structure and ensures the cultural consistency of new generations in every era. This is the quality of life in society, and any product that society produces either contributes to the formation and maintenance of the quality of life of society in this sense, or contributes to the destruction of this very quality of life of society. And accordingly, it turns out that what has already been said, if there is a need, then the question arises in the production of product, in its provision, and in the analysis of the consequences of production itself, the consequences of satisfying needs, and as a result, the entire spectrum of products, the entire spectrum of needs, falls into 2 classes. Demographically conditioned needs, that must be satisfied in order to ensure the quality of life of society in the previously defined sense, and degradational-parasitic needs, that must be eradicated from the life of society in order not to lower this very quality of life, but ensure it properly. Therefore, all courses in governance towards quality of product that ignore objective laws, ignore this cyclics of solving tasks of state governance in line with the conception of stable and safe development of society, are defective, and as a consequence, even in those cases where they can ensure the formation of the mentality of graduates of institutes of higher education, which allows them to organize the production of quality products at enterprises, in the sense of the term quality specified by the ISO 9000 standards, they open up opportunities for the production of mal-quality products, either by mistake or by intent, premeditated, and obviously vicious, erroneous intent. Therefore, the question of the quality of products, of building a subculture of governance towards quality, is impossible. It is unacceptable to consider all that, without the question of objective laws to which the life of society and all people personally are subordinated, without the question of demarcation of the needs in the formation of the spectra of demographically conditioned needs and degradational-parasitic needs, and outside the cyclics of the tasks of state governance presented in this picture. If this is absent, then there will be big problems. Before, I also talked more than once about the fact that the system of education underwent qualitative changes, Over a period of time from about the middle of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century. If before the middle of the 19th century, the study of canons was the basis of professional education, then, from the middle of the 19th century, the canons were squeezed out of the system of education by the mastery of methods, of particular task solutions, in the process of creating this or that product. In an era when scientific methods were the exception rather than the norm when creating products, the canons took shape on the basis of what is commonly called healthy thinking, the method of trial and error. Moreover, if we talk about the culture of senses and healthy thinking of that era, then in a number of cases they made it possible to create works of art that in the era of scientific methods we cannot reproduce. Here is one striking example that anyone can find. In Pyatigorsk, there is a rotunda gazebo which was named Aeolian Harp. It stands on a hill. It received the name Aeolian Harp in honor of the wind god of ancient Greek mythology, Aeolus, because when the wind blew, the gazebo made sounds. The gazebo was reconstructed, the effect disappeared. Now electronics reproduce a sound on a tape recording, the way this harp sounded. To put it differently, we factually have no reason to extol ourselves over the pre-scientific era. We must understand that era. The canons took shape in that era over decades, centuries, through the method of trial and error. This picture shows the moment of the beginning of a catastrophe. The Swedish battleship Vasa, built in 1627. In 1628, on its maiden voyage, not in the strongest wind, not even under all sails, it heeled, so the open gun ports of the lower deck began to draw water. The wind toppled the ship over on its side. According to various sources, she took with her from several dozen to more than 100 human lives. This is an example of apostasy from the canon. The Swedish king wanted to get the most powerful, the fastest ship. As a result, he got what he got. Vasa, if we compare it with the battleship Ingermanland, which belonged to the same type, but built a century later according to the project of Peter the Great, is a meter narrower, and as it turned out, the builder made it somewhat wider than expected according to the project approved by the king. Its draft was less respectively, and the displacement was less. Due to its lower displacement and lower draft, it had less ballast than it should have had. On top of that, 64 guns were the heaviest, 24 pieces of 48-pounder guns. The caliber of guns in those days was measured by the weight of a cast iron ball, 48 pounds. The displacement of the Ingermanland was 200 tons more. The width was greater. The draft was greater. Correspondingly, more ballast. The heaviest guns were 24 pieces of 32-pounders, and she had approximately the same sail area. The Ingermanland actually became a cannon. The most common type of ship of the line of the 18th century in the Russian Navy was a 60-gun ship of the line, a variation according to the structure of the Ingermanland. This was an era when there were no scientific methods for solving particular tasks. Now look further. This is the British battleship Captain, built in 1869. Pay attention to its hull. The silhouette gives the impression that it's a high-sided ship. But if you look closely, you will see that she is not really a high-sided ship. Near the ship there is a dinghy, and a white line that stretches along the hull. This is its main deck, on which there are two turrets. Above the turrets, there are shelter decks that connect the bow superstructure, called the forecastle, the middle superstructure, from which the smokestack and the stern superstructure, called a poop deck, stick out. But the ship's hull itself is low. In addition, the ship has 3 steel masts. Moreover, pay attention to the fact that the masts are not attached to shrouds, not to ropes, as was customary in the era of the sailing fleet, but to metal steel rods that go from the lower tops to the sides of the ship. That is, it is a rather heavy structure. Why are there sails on the ship? The answer is simple. This is a ship for ocean cruises, as it was conceived, and the level of development of boilers and steam engines in that era was such that it was impossible to provide an acceptable cruising range exclusively under steam. Therefore, at first the battleships and then the cruisers of that era had a developed, full-fledged sailing armament, which allowed them to sail long distances. And steam engines were used when there was no wind or in a combat situation, when it was required to maneuver regardless of wind. The development of ship technology was not fast, and sails ceased to be a necessary attribute of battleships somewhere in probably the late 70s and early 80s of the 19th century, and cruisers in the early 90s of the 19th century. Well, and so it was a normal thing for that era. Well, this is a printmaking dedicated to the death of Captain. The author of the project was engineer C.P. Coles, who insisted that it was indeed a very good ship, powerful, seaworthy, and in order to prove this, Captain, as a part of the squadron, was sent on an ocean voyage. The squadron sailed across the Atlantic from the British Isles to Gibraltar. Everything was fine. Captain behaved perfectly. And on the way back in the Bay of Biscay, the squadron got into a storm. During the storm, Captain capsized and perished with almost all the crew. Causes. This printmaking shows how the waves roll over the hull of the ship, and you can see the streams of water in the gaps between the main gun turrets. The main gun turrets are visible in this picture on the upper deck under the shelter deck designed for sailing work. And here you can see how 4 streams of water flow across the ship. Well, the situation is such that the stability characteristics of the ship are related to the area of operating waterline. And, in this position, the area of the operating waterline is the horizontal sections of the forecastle, gun turrets, middle superstructure and poop deck. That is, Captain had practically none of the stability necessary for safe sailing in sea conditions. In fact, Captain is a result of the fact that the cannons were lost. The methods of solving particular tasks in the process of designing ships had already been mastered. Therefore, it was strong enough, its stability was calculated, but it did not fit into the cannon. This picture shows diagrams of stability of 2 ships. Captain is dotted, and Monarch. The horizontal axis is the heel angles, and the vertical axis is the restoring moment. That is, the moment that tends to return the ship to 0 heel in the event of its static inclination. And the area under each curve on a certain scale is equal to the work required to tilt the ship by a certain degree. Take a closer look at these diagrams. The Captain diagram reaches its maximum at an angle of 21 degrees of heel. And the angle of vanishing stability, that is, when the restoring moment becomes 0 and the ship capsizes, this is 56 degrees. And for Monarch, a ship of a different structure, the maximum is about 35 to 40 degrees, and the angle of vanishing stability most likely is around 80 degrees. And this is the whole story associated with Captain. This is an indicator that scientific methods of solving particular tasks do not guarantee in and of themselves fitting into the canon. And the quality of products is, first of all, the formation of a set of requirements that allow to fit into the canon and thereby ensure the safety of use, convenience of operation, convenience and safety of servicing, and then the safety of removing an object from operation and recycling its products into recyclable materials or disposal of products. Therefore, the question arises of how to fit into the canon, because if they don't fit into the canon, then there will be big troubles. Take a look at this table. This table actually represents the life cycle of a product and the requirements for this product at different stages of the life cycle. First, let's go through the stages of the life cycle of the product. The first stage, production of products. There is no talk of working out of products here, because working out of products is, after all, primarily an intellectual activity, when the product as such either does not exist at all, or does not go beyond some testing grounds and laboratories. It all starts with the production of products. The second stage and the third stage relates to the operation. The second column is satisfaction of these needs through the products themselves, and the third column is product maintenance, maintaining its functionality, and the fourth column is disposal and recycling of products at the end of their operation. Vertically down, each column corresponds to a specific cell in which there are certain requirements for this product at the corresponding stage of its life cycle. So let's take a look at the requirement groups. The first requirement is conditioned by factors of the external environment and socio-cultural environment. These are, first of all, environmental requirements, which form a special subgroup in this group. If we again talk about the requirements that can be claimed in relation to a ship, a vessel, then the requirements are conditioned by the factors of the external natural environment, and the ship must be, first of all, at the stages of operation, compatible with the sea. This is the second column. Well, at the other stages too, if you're going to build a ship, then the environmental factors will be the depths in the area of the shipyard. Because if you are going to build an aircraft carrier with a draft of about 11 meters, and the depths of the area of the building block or slipway are 5 meters, then you won't be able to build an aircraft carrier here. That is, it turns out that this table gives an idea of how the requirements for the product should be formed at all stages of its life cycle. Further, there are requirements conditioned by ergonomics. Ergonomics is a science of correspondence of products, technologies, organization of production, the environment in which everything happens, a person acts, physiology and human psychology. And also the ergonomic requirements cover all 4 stages of the life cycle of the product that we are considering. The third group of requirements is directly conditioned by the tasks for which the products are created. The fourth group of requirements, this is a group of requirements conditioned by the possibility of accidents and catastrophes connected either with the product or with its production and disposal. In some cases, the satisfaction of these requirements may give rise to the need to create some additional types of products which are alternatively necessary for overcoming catastrophes and other kinds of troubles connected with these products. For example, if you are building a nuclear power plant, then you should immediately attend to the creation of a line of equipment that is necessary to eliminate such catastrophes as Chernobyl or Fukushima. If you don't do this, then you will create this equipment, as it was in reality, on the fly, and the consequences of the catastrophe will be more severe than they could have been, although of course they should be avoided. Next, the requirements conditioned by technology and organization of the implementation of all stages of the life cycle. In this table, the fifth group of requirements is highlighted with color, and cell 3.2 is also highlighted with another color. Why? Because cell 3.2 is exactly that with which most people tie the concept of quality of product. So the fifth group of requirements is highlighted with color. This is something that most of the time people don't think about when they create products. It is precisely because people don't think about this group of requirements that we have garbage islands in our oceans. If you want to create high-quality products, then correlating with the objective laws of all 6 groups, correlating with the cyclics of tasks of state governance, tailored for a specific type of product that you want to produce, you must fill out this table in great detail. This table is absent in courses of governance towards quality for the simple reason that it expresses a view on governance towards quality from the standpoint of the sufficiently general theory of governance, and correlates the life cycle of the product precisely with the entire function of governance. Outside of the methodology of the sufficiently general theory of governance, one can come to such a table only with a wild guess, instinctively, but not guaranteedly methodologically correctly. In order to fill out this table, process thinking, the skill of mastery of process thinking is required. Because if you don't see the life cycle of a product as a process, you will either not be able to formulate requirements for it, or the requirements that you formulate will be erroneous. That's all for today. Thank you for your attention.